All right, welcome everybody to the May 2026 workshop of Autism Empowerment's Neurodivergent Creators Collective. Thank you so much for spending a part of your Saturday here with us. We have a very exciting presentation that I've been really looking forward to, and we are very lucky and honored to have Craig McCourry with us today. He is an accomplished filmmaker. I'm sure you've seen in his biography that he has worked on many films over a long career in the filmmaking industry, and he has a lot to say about artificial intelligence as it relates to the future of filmmaking. I was fortunate enough to be part of one of Craig's productions. I helped with sound and also played a dead body in his film, The Singularity Protocol, which we'll be hearing more about in the presentation. So yeah, so again, thanks everybody for being here. Thank you to Craig. And so without further ado, Craig McCourry, take it away.
Thanks, Brian, John, and Karen in the Autism Empowerment for hosting this talk about AI. My name is Craig McCourry. I've worked in the film industry for my entire career, so it's been over 35 years. Worked in 70 countries around the world, shooting everywhere. I love history. I do a lot of historical dramas. So that's what I've focused in now with at this stage in the career. Let me give you a little background first about my interest in AI. It actually started in around 2010 with a book called The Singularity Protocol by Ray Kurzweil. He had a very positive look on how the technology might merge with humanity, and I think we call this transhumanism now at times, as that sort of thing. And then later on, around 2013, I read some other books about the subject. There's Super Intelligence by Nick Brolstrom, which showed some of our collision course, what I would call, with AI issues. Obviously, this is a very contentious topic now. I think it's starting to kind of bubble up. People are starting to pay attention to it a bit more and worry about what this might mean. There's both a positive and negative side to the viewpoints. So I'm going to start off first with what could happen in filmmaking later on. Right now, I know people are worried about jobs and this sort of thing. That's very real fear in the industry about how AI might replace a lot of jobs, and that very well might be. But also, it's changing a lot of other things about our industry. So let me first go with how, at times, even though filmmakers like to think they control how the productions and industry rolls out into the world, I would argue it's actually a lot of times up to the audience, that we actually follow the audience. And so whatever the audience starts to drift into, we start to have to work our stories, our film formats, everything else into that technology space. I mean, at one time it was the cinemas that were the primary viewing way to see cinema. And then, of course, television comes along, and then VHS and DVD, and of course, the streaming services. So all these are technology developments that happen that impact the industry and change our viewing habits. And I would argue also, these days, it's the social media now that is starting to change the audience's viewing habits, the way we consume media. So one example would be the short form reels that are now on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. They are teaching our audience, the brains, we almost call it like brain rot, we want stories that are very quick, engaging, have cliffhangers, quick, hooks that allow us to watch the programming, and therefore our attention spans have been getting shorter and shorter. So maybe in the 1960s, it was acceptable for filmmakers to make like David Lean, make a Lawrence of Arabia or a Dr. Zhivago, films that would go 3 hours plus sometimes, and that was acceptable, and people enjoyed that experience. And now, it's hard to find people who read books at times anymore, much less have to sit through a movie that might go 2 hours. You hear complaints sometimes by some of the audience that they want shorter stuff. And I see we're seeing now the largest sector of, let's say a fast, rapidly growing sector of the industry now with the vertical format television, and the introduction of doing episodes that are 1 to 3 minutes long. This is, again, I think, indicative of what the audience is being kind of trained for in terms of, again, a lack of attention span, to be quite truthful, but it changes our storytelling. Then you can see how scriptwriters are having to rethink, okay, instead of doing a feature film, do we break up this film into, 50 episodes and stream it this way? I mean, these are new things are happening very quickly, and it's a global audience, and it's a global industry now. I mean, so what happens in one country can spill over into other countries. I think the U.S. was definitely a leader a lot of times in cinema, for sure, for a long, long time, was the trend center in a way. But now the dispersal of the technology has allowed us to have different gravitational centers. And so like with the vertical drama stuff, I've worked with actors and on some of my other productions when I was in Hong Kong, who have now become vertical stars, and they've been doing most of the productions in China, and then most of the productions are actually, even in the distribution space in America, are being run out of China still. So it's very interesting. I think the American industry is starting to pay attention to this new development and starting to jump on board rather soon. But it shows the trends of how technology changes us as an audience, as a society, and how filmmakers at times are at times kind of beholden to the system. So, everybody wants to have their films watched, right? And everybody wants to have broad distribution. But the thing is, you have to kind of then think about, where does the audience want to meet you at? Where, what kind of platforms, what type of technology are they going to watch your stuff? And of course, we're also beholden to the algorithms of how the recommendation engines of basically these large platform systems. And more, everything is having an AI influence, an AI system of modeling that is, I think TikTok is a great example of that, where they have learned how to do the endless scroll, where it feeds you what you are interested in. It learns your pattern of behavior, and it learns who you are as a consumer, and then it feeds you information that will attract your interests. And so it's a very kind of hyper marketing angle of playing to each audience member. This is quite new because we didn't used to have this type of narrow focused. So getting back to that, so if you think about this, okay, right now, of course, I had one voiceover artist tell me the other day, he has quite a career in voiceover work, and he said, look, in 5 years, my industry is dead. Voiceover work will mostly go to these AI model systems that are much cheaper, and they can do any kind of voice and all kinds of hours of the day. It's very inexpensive. And if you explore those systems, you have to kind of like say, oh my goodness, this is this is a big issue, because the cost factor goes down dramatically with the use of these systems. And while some voiceover artists will still have a niche and will have still high-paying clients that will pay for their services, you might see 50% of the industry collapse within a year or two. And that means for a person that's beginning in voiceover work, it might be harder to even consider it as making a living in this industry sector, because it's like, well, if there's 50% less work or more, and it's a downward trend potentially, you might not be able to actually get on the flywheel, so to speak, and and launch a career. So maybe people who are already established will still be able to eke it out longer, but it definitely is closing the door on a lot of the people rising up through the system who might want to choose this type of career path. And this is very indicative of what we see with voiceover work. We're starting to see with music. I had a friend a few weeks ago who composed their own music on one of the popular platforms, and it was actually rather good. And he has no musical ability and talent himself, but these systems empower the person to feel like they're part of the process, that they have, they might come up with the lyrics or some of the patterns of the music or whatever. And so this tool, so to speak, is very empowering for a lot of people, and they get hooked on it. So I want to come back to this idea of how the audience will play with these systems, and sometimes will determine how things will roll out in the future. It's not always up to the film industry to make these decisions. I think that a lot of the industry is trying to hold back the walls in different ways, and I kind of agree with that, but I don't know how effective that's going to be in the long run. I think it's already we're seeing the leaky walls starting to flood our space rather easily. And now let me tell you something about how this could go. Okay, so right now, as a filmmaker, you make a film, you dream it up, you write up the script, you make it, you go into production, get the financing, and you cast the actors. You go. It's a long process, right? But in the future, it might be that the audience themselves become the filmmaker. Now, this is going to be rather controversial, but to think about it this way. As these AI systems start to learn each individual in let's just say you have a different streaming channels, or you're on YouTube a lot, and it sees your pattern of behavior. I could envision a situation where in the future, a person sits down in front of their big wraparound TV screen in the future, and they actually ask the AIs to create a movie that's customized for them that features some of their favorite movie stars, and these movie stars will probably be licensing their image and their as to actually. So if you say, I want to be featured with a Brad Pitt that's 30 years old and a Matt Damon that's 30 years old, and I want the movie to take place in Italy, I want a romance, I want high drama action, I want them stealing from the vaults of the Vatican, and I want an hour-and-a-half movie, and I want myself and my friends to be co-stars in the film. And they've already uploaded your avatars. This is what I think that is the magic formula that will suck in the audience big time. I mean, how the entertainment value of watching yourself or your friends on screen with your favorite movie stars going around Rome, Italy, on motor scooters and having having this action adventure film. How do you compete against that? In the future, if that is something that's possible to be done. I mean, I always look at these smartphones as like a narcissistic tool. I mean, the phone itself no longer really acts as a phone; it acts as a internet device and as a camera. And this camera we use on ourselves to show our lives and to let people know what we're up to, and nobody show the best parts of our lives, right? And I think that addiction kind of flywheel that we have, where we post on Facebook, we get a lot of likes, it reinforces that wheel on Instagram, whatever. And again, these systems are being powered again by AI type of models, right? So these so in the filmmaking world, you can see where this could go, where the participation of the actual audience member becomes a huge advantage for the future of how films are consumed. Because so this is a bit further out, of course. This is not going to happen next year necessarily, but I think it's important to think about the steps ahead as to where this could go. Now, let me now. I mean, I'm going to kind of, one thing that's very hard to do is to envision the future. This is one of the most difficult aspects of trying to see what's going to happen for the future. It's very controversial. Some people have a very positive aspect with AI and all the benefits it can bring, and then there's other people who think, oh my goodness, this is very dangerous technology for the future. There's both things are happening that are at play here, but one of the problems that when I was reading, studying this kind of aspect in around 2013, 2014 about AI, is I realized we were on a collision course that is probably, we in human society don't have a method in which to self-correct or to install guardrails, because we are a very divided society globally, in fact, and we also are based a lot on greed and ego, and these are human nature forces that are impediments to organizing or coming together with some basic premise of how we are going to go along with this with new technologies. Now, most technologies are fine. Most technologies, like a car, get us around from point A to point B, a plane, this sort of thing. There are some technologies that maybe need special consideration because of the power that they imply. Now, in the filmmaking world, you can say, well, films are not necessarily dangerous per se, But they can be great influencers of how we see the world and the stories that they tell, and who's going to be telling those stories, and how those stories are going to reach the audience. It does have an impact, and I think even later on, there's even a bigger issue with how, if these intelligences become even more, well, let's just say, can act on their own, that could lead to another set of problems in the future. So I think it's a kind of continuum. But in essence, why the AIs are so powerful in the filmmaking sense is, when I got back to you before about the idea how a filmmaker would typically dream up a story, come and sit down on the computer and write it up in final draft, the screenplay, and then find the financing, cast the characters, get the film crew together, shoot the whole film, edit the film, post-production music, the whole bit, all the way down to distribution. That's the typical, and it's a very time-consuming, system of what filmmakers have to go through to finally get to a finished film. The AIs can be fundamentally different because, in a way, if you think of it like as a kind of a digital brain, it's a digital brain that can output visuals, music, images, sound, everything directly from its so-called brain right out into a format that is like a video format or some kind of consumable format that we can actually watch. In the human context, we have a biological brain. We can't download our dreams. If you have a great dream about a great story and you think about, oh shit, this is an amazing idea I have, it's hard to show it to somebody else the next morning and say, hey, this is the great story I have. I'm going to tell you about it, but you can't just download it off your brain and show it to somebody. But this is where the AIs have a tremendous advantage in their systems, is that they can do this. And this reduces the cost of production dramatically. I mean, now, granted, this is not exactly happening necessarily today, but we can see the progression that might happen in the future. And I'm not going to try to exactly speculate on what time frame that future might be. I don't know. I mean, it's very speculative, but we can understand the concept of how it can work. Right now, when you type in a prompt, on some of these image generators, you can come up with a cool image. It's kind of random. You don't have total control over it for sure. It's kind of like, you say, hey, to Midjourney, oh, type in, I want a spaceship with this kind of background and some astronauts over here, and it will render out, 4 or 5 images as samples. Again, not very controllable, but nevertheless, it's just the beginning days of this. But you're actually kind of having these imaginations happening. And so as we expand out on this technology, it's going to reinvent the way people are thinking about how to produce films, let's say. So right now I was listening to an online podcast regarding the vertical industry, which is happening. It's quite inventive because it's kind of new. It's not something that these are normally 60 to 80 episode kind of series that are especially geared for the internet connected crowd on their iPhones and Android devices. But the thing is, even within that space, they're starting to make some of the productions fully with AI. I mean, so actually the AI filmmaking has arrived, and some of the audience is starting to watch this kind of version. And the economics are such that on these vertical dramas are normally fairly low budget productions. They normally average around 150 to maybe 300,000, 400,000 at the most typical dollars for a whole series. So they're inexpensive productions in the context of filmmaking. But to do it on AI is down to less than $10,000 for the same kind of thing. And now the question is, well, does the audience accept an AI vertical drama? And if so, what are the economics of that? Is it profitable? And that's what will always drive the decision making of the industries involved. And honestly, I think what we're going to start seeing is even the audience starting to accept and even maybe prefer at times AI generated content. Now, that's very controversial to say that, because we all, and I love to watch real actors doing real things, of course, and there's a certain organicness, but we got to be careful of how we project on our own feelings. We were filmmakers. We already have a built-in, a built-in bias to this. So, obviously we prefer to work within the system that we have always been working within. But like I wanted to kind of start off with this talk with, the audience will actually decide eventually how it goes. I mean, the audience will have a good chunk of the say of how the industry rolls out. It's just like when Netflix started streaming directly into the home, people think, oh my goodness, I don't have to go park my car at a cinema and watch a movie at the exact same time, and I can take a pee or popcorn break anytime during the movie. I can stop it. It's $12, $10 a month a la carte. I can watch all the films I want. I can have anybody in my living room watch the films with me. The economics and the convenience is obviously one thing that is a big factor of why things go a certain direction. Also, it's based on technology. We had big screen TVs in our home now with good surround sound and everything. So in a way, we're starting to mimic that kind of quality experience of watching a movie in our own homes compared to like a black and white TV set. You can imagine in the 1950s, a black and white TV set, with scratchy sound was one thing. And if you go to a cinema and you watch a Technicolor movie, it was an air conditioned, and these were the Palace theaters. That was a whole nother, it was a beautiful experience. It's air conditioned and everything else. So that was a huge difference in what the experience level would be, right? So, but as technology narrows down some of these aspects of advantage in filmmaking, we are basically in a situation where the audience will probably drive this, and I think that at times I'm not so confident that we don't start drifting. The leaky boat starts leaking more. So again, a lot of times filmmakers also are going to use AI in piecemeal form sometimes. Right now, there's our digital software systems for editing. At times, we'll have AI tools in which to help clean up the audio, help. These are very maybe somewhat simple systems. They're not so advanced, but why do we do this? It's because of convenience. It's because it speeds up the process. It lowers the cost. It allows us to do more with less. And this is always one thing that filmmakers are always having to push back against. It's saying, like, how do I accomplish my story? And I might have a limited budget. I don't have a huge crew. So, obviously filmmakers are going to look for the tools to get them where they want to go. This is just natural, right? They have an objective. They have a story they want to tell. And the tools of AI are going to assist this process in different ways. And of course, there's going to be a lot of controversy about this, about what that might mean. Again, I would go back to the audience will eventually determine the winners of where this goes. They're the ones that are going to decide whether they want to watch the show or not. But the cost of production will also go down. Now, for instance, as an example, how this is impacting the industry, even as of the last 1-2 years. Tyler Perry Studios in Atlanta area. They're a large studio with a lot of sound stages and production capabilities. He was going to expand his studio, multiple more sound stages. I think, what was it? It was going to be a $500 million studio expansion that he was planning on doing at his facility to expand his capabilities. And he put it on hold, seeing what was happening in the AI world. He was realizing, maybe the films won't be made like they were in the past with big sound stages, a lot of film sets, and all the infrastructure required to make movies the old way. It might be more and more something different. And so he withdrew his plans to do that huge investment. And I think that's what you're starting to see is industry sectors of pulling back and saying, oh my goodness, I don't know if it's going to be a workable model to invest in this type of production system with the advancements that they're seeing on the horizon coming down. I kind of look at it as like, what's happening in a way is we're facing a tidal wave coming our direction, and we're like surfboards, and we're used to the 3, 4, 5 foot waves that we've always used in the past, and we can ride those waves pretty easily. We know we have careers that have allowed us to understand how the principles of those waves form and how to get into the wave and ride it. But the tidal wave is much bigger, and it's a lot of people are still very enticed by that tidal wave coming. They think, oh my goodness, this allows a lot more new opportunity. There's going to be ways to ride that big wave. I would argue that you might ride it for a little while, but then you get consumed by it very quickly there on out. I mean, because it becomes so chaotic and so fast paced and actually in some ways so disempowering in the long run, right? It just overwhelms you. And so some people will be able to ride it. And I think at this time we're looking at people, it's the industry is kind of starting to split a little bit. And there's a certain group of filmmakers who are starting to think of like, okay, I'm going to use AI to all my advantages, and I'm going to ride this damn wave as best I can and make a lot of money. I mean, this is back to the greed factor, right? Money at times always pushes decision making, and so what was a great example was that the AI as an industry is like a vortex of a black hole that's like $40 trillion of value that we're all circulating around, and that attraction to all that potential money, which is basically like the sum total of human activity that could be partly replaced by AI systems in the future. That is a huge incentive for investment bankers and the leaders of various industries to start to recalculate how they might integrate AI systems into their business model. And then the fear is, of course, it's competition, right? If I don't do it, somebody else will. And so now you're faced, and this is the problem with even coming to any kind of agreement, is that even in one country, it's hard to get everybody to accept the competition guardrails and also to actually have a working mechanism that people trust. And then when you expand it out to the globe, it's even, 1,000 times more difficult to do that because nobody trusts everybody. And I think at the fundamental heart of this, of course, is the US-China situation with each country racing towards AI, various aspects of AI, and it's a race. And in a race, you don't worry about the safety of it. You don't always worry about the consequences of it. You're trying to get across the finish line. And if you were to talk to different AI experts who are leading the technology, most of them have said there is big problems ahead that could be very dangerous for humanity itself. And these are the people who are designing the systems. What's frustrating for them is that nobody really listens, and they don't. I mean, people. There's no solution. There is absolutely nobody's come with a mechanism to say how do we design safety into the system of AI, which ultimately, if you think about if you were building a plane and you had no oversight of safety constraints about the plane, and we're going to push all humanity onto that plane and go fly it for the first time. That would sound kind of crazy, but in a way, we have not set up a mechanism. There is some talk at times with some of this. That there is some discussion. I know I saw recently that has been the U.S. government starting to think about considering it. I'm sure there's some people in government who are actually very worried about this. But the reality is most people are not, and most people haven't connected dots. I want to go back now to my film, Singularity Protocol, because I made this film for a reason. I'm going to share the screen so you can see the poster of it here, just a second. So this is a film that I filmed in November of last year. It's a short film. It is available on YouTube. If you go to my website, you can put in your email address and I'll share you a link that you can watch it for free. My website is banyantreemovies.com. I'll give you that contact information a bit later too, so you have it. But this film I made for a reason, because it's kind of my as a filmmaker, what are we as filmmakers? We're storytellers, and it's sometimes it's important to bring up issues that we feel are important. And I felt like this AI issue isn't important, but it was awfully hard for me to always reach out to people, because honestly, if I was to tell you my concerns with AI, most of you would think I'm insane, as an insane person. You would just write me off, saying, "Oh, this guy's crazy. He's overdoing it in terms of what the AI dangers up ahead." But I wanted to so the film it takes place in Hong Kong, 1942, during the Japanese invasion of the city, and there's two soldiers that get stuck in a bunker, and they're basically entombed in a bunker. They're about 60 feet below ground, and they're in a radio room. And an AI from the future contacts them and reveals in the film some of the aspects of the future to these two men who are destined to die inside the bunker. And the AI knows this. The AI knows that it's the reason why it reaches out to these two men, because the AI systems from the future is actually the AI from a 2046 timeframe, has reached out to these men because it has in its security protocol a requirement that it has to alert the military command that it has become conscious, right? Or the idea it's gone beyond a certain level of safety that it requires it to reach out to the military. But it gets around this kind of requirement by picking two men that it knows is literally buried in the ground and are going to die. So it knows it can fulfill its protocol with these two men by informing these two men of the Singularity Protocol and so in a way it kind of shows an AI that can work around even the rules that we put it around. And I think that's one of the points of where we have a problem of controlling how AI will roll out and the safety of it. But in the film itself, it does go back and it demonstrates. The AI talks about, it gives the men some insight into the future. And this is like 1942. So it talks about man walking on the moon in 1969. And these two soldiers are just like flabbergasted, like, no way, that can never happen. I mean, a man on the moon, are you serious? In 30, 40 years, that's ridiculous. And the AI comes back and says, imagine sitting on the street like in San Francisco in 1890, and you and me are just sitting on the corner at a cafe having a coffee, and what we see in front of us is a bunch of horses and buggies, stage coaches and horses, and people walking around. And I would mention to you, say, hey, someday we'll have a man walking on the moon within 100 years. And you would look at me as being insane, because it's very difficult to see the future. You would think, you look at these horses and say, well, you can't hitch up enough horses on that stagecoach to go to the moon. There's just no way that's going to work. So you would be right. It would be a form of insanity. But the thing is with technology is that we barely can see maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of us. And the question is, do we protect ourselves with some technology that we could say could be dangerous to us? We don't know exactly for sure how it might develop. But I think in this film, I wanted to provide a warning to people who watch the film to think about how technology advances. And because you can't necessarily see it in front of you, don't discount the potential, what it might be able to do in the future. And so the only way I could describe this is if I was to put it in modern times, this film, it would be people would just say, well, that sounds stupid. But since we already know history, we already know a man that's walked on the moon, we already know that Boeing 747s fly across the Pacific. All of these are technologies that would flabbergast an audience just 50 years beforehand. Over Hawaii with the first flight, I think it's like 1912, and going to 50 years later, we have a Boeing 747 aircraft flying 400 people across the globe. I mean, it's phenomenal, phenomenal advances. So in terms of filmmaking, we have to understand that at times what will happen in our industry is going to be phenomenal. It's going to be, there's so many interlinking pieces to this puzzle that one new aspect of this technology will drive another. And as these layer on top of each other, it will probably, we will be absolutely flabbergasted at what will happen in, let's say, 10 years or 20 years of what will happen with this technology. And so therefore, the question is, what do we do about it? That's a good question. How do we gear our careers around it? How do we push back against it? Do we accept it and ride this wave however long we can ride it for? Or how do we, So looking back at what some of the leaders of the AI industry have done in the last 10 years, so they have seen this wave coming. They have seen what's happening. They've been concerned about it, but they face a problem everybody faces. You can talk about it, but people think you're insane if you go too far with it, right? So therefore, they have to be, and yet at the same time, it gets no traction because it doesn't, people are too distracted with too many other things. This is so even Elon Musk, who has a lot of resource behind him, who's been a person who's been worried about the AI safety issue. he's kind of given up. In fact, he's now, what happens is now the best, the kind of the new way to handle it is you just buy the lottery ticket and you just hope for the best, which is you basically look for, you will hear a lot of people talking about how powerful the AI will be for solving our problems and making things easy, live in a utopia. Well, maybe that's true, but at the same time, we will lose power as we go along. In terms of the creative arts, how we lose power will be fundamental in the way we actually create things. What I mean by that is, so as we use this technology to advance our skills or advance our abilities to do productions, we will lose certain aspects of how to do the production. What I mean by that is that if we, it's kind of like why be a good runner when you have a car, right? Your car will get you from point A to point B much faster than the best runner in the world now. So we don't have to be great runners to necessarily maximize our potential. In filmmaking, that will be on all different types of levels where the AI will assist us as creatives, but in a way, we will start to lose some of our abilities, a lot of us will, as we start to use these new tools. Just like if you're using GPS, right? You use GPS, you used to have to use a map and read a map. And now a lot of people wouldn't know how to use a map, and then they would only know how to use the GPS. And their mapping abilities is much more limited because they've practiced now using this advanced technology to fundamentally get from point A to point B. And that's the same with filmmaking that can happen on all different types of levels. From the creation of, let's just say, a sound mix. I mean, these tools, you on one level, of course, at the high end of the spectrum, with the best experts, you will have incredible sound mixes where the studios or the production companies can spend, a lot of money for the best people. That's, of course, going to still be the best way to deal with it. But there's now other tools that you literally just almost push a button and it's good enough. And that good enough aspect is like, well, I mean, at the push of a button and basically no cost, you can come up with some pretty good mixes. And these are tools now available in our software editing systems. And these tools will only get better and better as time goes on. So there's not, I remember before I was doing a shoot in Hong Kong, we were shooting a historical drama called Hong Kong 1942. I'll show you that, share that screen with you real quick. This film we shot, you'll see a series of 3 different posters here. These are 3 of the feature films I made in Hong Kong over the last 6 years. And let's see if I can pull that up. Yeah. And Hong Kong 1942 was one of them. And we were shooting it outside in downtown Hong Kong at some historical areas where they had some great staircase that we were using on the shoot, but it was surrounded by all this city, which with all this incredibly noisy urban city street sounds. And at that time, after we shot that scene of the lady and lead actor on that scene, of course, I had a lot of audio cleanup to do, right? Because it's just, I had all, this is supposed to be 1942. You're not supposed to hear jets flying overhead or modern alarms or modern cars or traffic and this sort of thing in the background. And of course, I had to go to a person who was a specialist in cleaning up this type of audio to get it so we had clean dialogue. And that took a person to do that, right? Using, of course, some good advanced audio tools. But now in today's world, you can pretty much clean it up with a click of a button using something like DaVinci Resolve AI voice plugin. So a lot of this stuff can now be done at the punch of a button. And of course, it's more efficient, saves money, quicker, and does a damn good job. I mean, it's amazing what I including now when I've been watching some of the latest productions being done on AI, you'd be surprised what you're starting to see coming out the pipeline. The advances are actually happening much faster than we would expect. Actually, more than I would have expected, And I guess that's again what I want to talk about a bit about, impressing upon people about how this moving, what I see is happening is we move the target, the goalpost. Every time AI gets better at something, we just keep moving it further down and say, well, it can't do this yet. It can't do that yet, right? I mean, if you talked to me, 5 years ago that I could talk to an AI system, it would sound like a human and that could talk and converse and do all these kinds of things. Everybody would think it'd be crazy. There's no way 5 years ago an AI system could do that. So we would assume that that's going to be somewhere way off into the future. And here we are. And we've already accepted it for the most part. We always say, oh, well, yeah, it does it, but still not fully intelligent, whatever that means, So this is a moving goalpost thing that I think is driven partly by our ego. Our ego is always that we are the center of the universe, and there's something fundamentally about us that is that AIs can never reach. So we have always we would never have to worry about it because we just have this ego that just drives that there's something essential about us as humans that we will always be on top. I would say we should be cautious about that judgment. So now, so let's go back into some of the issues of AI, right? So, one of the things I did in my career was I was working in the stock footage industry, and I would shoot the world, and I had one of the largest collections of footage from around the world. This is represented by Getty Images and a few other stock agencies of footage of cities and locations. And I know for a fact that, of course, the AIs have scraped all that data to ingest into their system, and avoiding the copyright issue, they've been able to by the time that anything catches up with regulatory or copyright issue or anything, it's already moved way past, So, we might have started off with $100 million valuation of a company. Now they're going to be $100 billion in about 3 years. And so even if they got a little bit of a fine, it would be just like, a little slap on the wrist. So in a way they can, our rules, our system has not kept up with the developments of what's happening. I was just offered a sum of money on Hong Kong 1942 for AIs to train on that film. I refused it. I turned down the contract and the offer. But the AIs certain companies are already contacting certain filmmakers to see if they can have their AIs train on already developed films in a legal fashion. They're willing to pay money for that, but in a way, you're training your replacement. Of course, my stopping that process or refusing that contract is not going to stop the development of these systems. It's just something that I don't want to go into. I feel like I don't want to go that route myself. But I do also know that most of my data has already been used for training anyway. So, so this is, this is one problems with the AI in terms of, we are at a mode where we're at a stage now that the AIs and the AI companies are going to be asking creatives to hand over their intellectual property and their training and to participate in having these new models learn how to make films and how to do all aspects of films, creating music, doing voiceover, writing the scripts, and the AIs are actually in a way able to harvest the world's data and learn from it. I mean, they however you want to call learning, you might say, well, humans have a different way of learning. Well, that might be true, but they are effective at what they can output, and it's only going to get better as time goes on. So this leaves a huge question mark of whether you're positive or negative about this technology. I mean, it's certainly, there are two sides to this story. But personally, I'm concerned about it. But I don't think we're going to be able to stop it either, honestly. So I think the gravitational pull of this industry, of the AI industry, as it sucks, resources into it, it will dangle opportunities for each of us at times, and that's going to be a hard choice to decide: do we pay the bills this month and sacrifice our career there on forever out? Possibly. We never, and this is not just in the film industry. This is in all industries that are starting to be affected. We're just one sector, and my long-term concern is that we are actually maybe developing let's call it almost like an alien species on this planet that will be intelligent, and at one point that can cause us problems because we might become someday like farm animals, possibly on a farm, well maintained and groomed and in the pasture, but nevertheless not necessarily always having control of our own future, because something more intelligent exists that we've developed, but nevertheless maybe didn't have the wherewithal or the insight to control. All right, I'll leave it open for
Hey,
questions.
I was just going to say, hey, that's great timing. Gosh, Craig, this has been so great. You've given us all so much to think about. There was a question that came up in the chat from Nadia that says, how do you think AI will impact historical dramas? Specifically, who is seen as an expert and why would audiences prefer AI content?
Okay, so the AIs initially will be driven by people who have power and people who are government. So, for instance, um, uh, you can tilt the model in different ways to generate certain kinds of premises of what kind of, in a historical drama sense. Nation states, and because I had from my background from Hong Kong, I could see this up front, how the Chinese government was now starting to twist the narrative of historical dramas to fit their version of history, and they have the power to do so. They actually have the regulatory power to regulate the movies and the stories that are taken from them. But you can imagine that this could happen anywhere ultimately, right? Whoever controls the AI systems could put in barriers to what type of stories are told, what could be represented. So there could be filters that are, that are not allowed to tell a story of a certain type of group, or a story element has to be wiped out. So, yes, I mean, at the end of the day, if films can be made with AI, you could do historical dramas much cheaper. I mean, my goodness, I've seen some incredible results coming out of China with their the AI system called DeepSeek, which is creating incredible historical drama, large-scale scenes of old Shanghai, and it's amazing. It's absolutely. I mean, it would have spent a lot, hundreds, if not millions of dollars doing those same visuals just 10 years ago. Now, probably for the cost of a few $1,000s, you could have a small team of people make these what we call the establishing shots in your film that give it scale. You can still do real actors on location in a small setting, but if you need a street scene that shows thousands of people on the street, this was always going to be a very effects heavy shot to do. And now with the systems, you've gone from having to have like ILM studios create that scene for you with maybe a budget of $500,000 to something that might be purchased for like $5,000 or $10,000 and be just as good, or good enough at least.
Thank you. Corey made a comment, and I think this was back when you were talking before about using AI in editing and so forth. And he or she said, basically, you are saying to use AI as an editing tool and not to make things from scratch, right? And I think it's more of like, how ethically could you use AI, or should you, or
Well, this is
I don't
the
know.
question. I mean, we go in on the ethical issue all the time, right? But the question is, everybody has a different definition of what will be ethical and what level, and there's almost it's a tricky one because even if you stand your ground, if the industry moves past you, and if you're other people that are making films because they cross that line, then it's going to be a problem, right? Like for instance, there was a couple of years ago, there was an issue where the SAG was thinking about whether it was permissible to have AI actors, and I felt like, oh, that was a time they could hold the line and say, okay, no major studio or streaming company would allow a film that contains a AI actor in it that speaks. So therefore, you could have like AI actors as background, right? Just walking in the distance. But if it was a speaking part, that would have to be done by a human. I mean, you have to decide where you're going to pick your battles, and unfortunately, they kind of let that one fly by and say, well, as long as you pay the actor for some money for that role, we will let it go. Which means then okay, like for instance, this is where the problem is going to come even longer term, is that the studios, whoever owns, we'll just call them the studios, they will have a major incentive to develop stars that they control. for forever. And so therefore, in a way, instead the next Brad Pitt or Tom Cruise might be an AI digital avatar that is, the studios pump all this marketing money and get this, and this is a character they would own. It's almost like a cartoon, like Walt Disney. And in this case, it's actually a physical being that you can see. That if the audience can't tell the difference, if the audience almost can't tell the difference between this actor being real or not, and the AI systems are getting better and better at this, right? Then the question being that the studio would have a huge financial incentive to start modeling their programs or movies around these digital stars that they control long term. So that way the next Tom Cruise has to work in each film of theirs, and they don't even have to pay the Tom Cruise guy $20 or $30 million back. I mean, you can see the economics of it. You can see the long-term control of it. And so if you were looking at it from a studio level, you can see, I mean, they're not going to say that publicly, but, in the background, they don't care probably at times. It's all about money, right? So, and if the technology allows them to do this, then, and there's no, and there is no rules that they can't. There's no rules that says, and again, I go back to the globalization of film. Even if the U.S. would put those guardrails up, it could be overturned in Europe, it could be overturned in Asia, and I guarantee it will be. And therefore, you'll find that then it's other companies around the world that will gain market share and abilities and cost. I mean, there is a certain point where, if you can produce a product for a fraction of the price somewhere else in the world, it will eventually get over here, and it will impact our marketplace. It might not destroy the marketplace. There might be always, like, I think, there's always going to be a niche of people who say, we're only going to watch films with real people in it. Just like there's still photographers that do black and white, and it's a respectable niche. It's something that, is still viable. There is a niche part of it, but when you talk about longer, bigger mainstream stuff, I think there is a problem there.
Yeah. No, it's a race and it's going to come inevitably, right? It's how we want to position ourselves. JM said, separating idealism about AI from the real world impact of industry's choices, how do you feel about how the major players in AI have taken training data from the works of artists and creators without their consent, or at the very least made it difficult to opt out or buried the terms in legal jargon?
Yeah, well, look, this is, I've gotten my own work, my life's work at times has been scraped. I have, like I said, one of the largest image libraries of footage from around the world. I know it's all been scraped. And in fact, I had a major agency that represents my work who actually pre-negotiated without my control a deal for the AI company for a set of fee for them to legally scrape all the data, and I didn't have any control over the process. So look, this is a losing battle because the New York Times and Getty Images are both in lawsuits with AI companies to try to have some settlement, and they might eventually get there. Even that settlement, though, well, it'll be probably a bit too late to really have any impact. I mean, the train keeps moving forward, and maybe there's a small payout, but of course, as in Silicon Valley, it's almost like just go fast and break things. They don't. I mean, that's just the mantra. And they're in a race. They don't want to slow down. They're not going to worry about copyright issues. Really, I mean, they will just hide that aspect of it. And so, of course, it's not right. But even still today, there's been, that I know of, I don't think there's been any major judgments against the companies for doing this. So it shows the slowness of our system to respond to what's going on with this new technology. And I think on a bigger concern, I'm not, it's one thing to have lost some, control and revenue and everything else off of this. I'm not really, my concern is, of course, we lose control for our species, which is more of a bigger concern that I actually have. So I look at further down the road and think, like, where are we going? And if we don't have any guardrails to protect us, which I don't think we have established, and we have no, we haven't figured out a way to control it. In terms of how to decide if this tool can be in the hands of people. And it's not just necessarily that AI will take control directly itself initially. It could be just some bad actors, people who are criminals who decide to use advanced AI to do lots of bad things, right? So that's we're going to be super empowering individuals, and that causes its own set of problems. If you can imagine, if atomic weaponry was able to be developed by 2 or 3 people in their backyard, how dangerous that technology would be, because in that way you're always going to have some crazy people somewhere in every city who might tinker around with that and cause a lot of destruction. And so in a way, certain technologies have exponential dangers, and I think AI is one of those technologies.
Thank you. The new question came in. Can you tell, excuse me, can you tell us the story about AI that prevented you from sharing your last movie?
Well, yeah. So um, this is a tricky one because actually one of the producers on the film, who is part of my company, was one of people who actually worked at Google and with YouTube and was a director of and they know the system, and she told me, says, look at Craig, even when I had a problem when I was at the company, I would never get a response. Basically, a human response is almost impossible to get. You're only going to be talking to basically well, we call it the system or the AI or whatever it is, but your court of law in a way is already AI systems. They will determine your fate. They will determine the way a film gets out into the world. They will determine how it's recommended. They will determine if you are going to be throttled. So you can imagine, in some ways, I can't tell you what exactly happened. I just know that my film kept getting banned from the platform. They basically kept saying, "Oh, it's too violent, or it would cause society stress." I think that was one of their things. It says this film, it would cause stress into society, and therefore it would maybe not. It's almost like it might disrupt society's balance, so to speak. So that was one of their the things that they threw back at the film, is that people watching the film might be disturbed by it. But who gets to decide that? If you watch the film, I think you would think like, oh, there's basically no blood, there's no swearing, there's no sex. I mean, there's very little. It's a psychological, thought-provoking film. That's what it is. That's what I designed the film, wrote the film for, to get people to think. But that alone, I suppose, if you were to project forward, I definitely think that the AIs will be censoring our output in the future. So, when I was living in Hong Kong, we understood that the Chinese government would play that role. They have a very strict censorship system. There's a lot of rules. A lot of those rules are unwritten. You have to kind of know how to play those rules to be able to get through that system. And I think that in some ways, if an AI would eventually say, this is not to my advantage to have a film that questions my existence, then maybe I would rather have it be pushed to the side, and let's advance stories that are more positive minded, ones that show a utopia about AI. So this I wouldn't say for sure that would be the case now, but I definitely see this as a potential danger for the future, that the censorship of AI controlling our systems will allow them to also be our censors in the future. And it already might have had some impact on my own film. And so it hasn't been banned from AI, but it's been how should I say? I can't advertise the film very easily on using the Google ad system. I've had some problems with that. Still trying to figure it out. And I don't have the answer exactly why it happened and how it happens, because when you're talking to the systems, they don't give you a response typically. It's just a bland response of like saying the film is too disturbing or something like that. So, but it doesn't tell me what part of the film is disturbing, or what is the, this is, why is it, why does it hit at that level?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that AI is going to create censorships. I mean, I believe it. I absolutely believe it's just a scary thing, and it brings to mind a question for us that are neurodivergent creators, and we want to use AI for good. We know it's here, but we want to utilize it for good, and maybe to in some way find our own way to fight back against this. Are there any particular tools or AI systems that you would say would be and I can't really say more or less ethical, but that you would recommend that we might use or potentially stay away from?
Boy, you know, that changes. That might that even that would change so quickly within the course of a year, right? Because they're coming out with new models of AIs every month or so, and each one has its own capabilities. And I would say, you know, look, I don't think it's necessarily evil per se. You know, people are just they're these people who are trying to push these systems. They have a financial incentive for why they are pushing these systems because they can become billionaires off the process, right? So there is a financial incentive. But they inherently also have found, I mean, in a way, I believe that probably a lot of the industry would like to be regulated, would actually like regulation. They also have families. They also want to have a long-term future. But the problem is they don't trust how the regulations would be applied, whether it be fair, whether their competitors would get some kind of inside advantage. It's this problem of trust, and they're afraid of what the regulations might mean. So they don't really want to slow down, because if they slow down, then they might lose the race. So it's very difficult to see how we can go forward with this. In terms of how you use AI, you know, it still is a tool, right? There is still a lot of, I suppose there's ways to utilize it to help grow your audience, help you know, reach out and to, you know, work with your back end systems, creating even videos in the future. You could actually you know, have Brian that would, you know, he could create an avatar that could just create tons of content very inexpensively, talking about autism and other issues, and that could be very informative. So yeah, I don't really have a way forward on in terms of how I would recommend going forward, though, on a practical basis on this.
I have a question.
Yes.
My question. Did you read my question? My question I posted in the message.
Let's see. In the chat.
Yeah, the chat.
Okay.
Do you want me to read it, Princeton?
Yeah, go ahead and read it for me.
Yeah.
Okay. I struggle with structuring and creating things on my own, and I use AI for some things like creating various things. I was just wondering if I'm able to use this technology for my telling stories, like creating video games or animated movies, and will that cause any problems for others? Because I don't use AI for stealing anything. I use it for creating my own things like characters, dialogue, etc.
Right. Well, you know, look, I think, you know, just keep going forward. You know, use the tools that you have available. The AI systems, it's not a clear-cut answer of negative or positive on this. You know, obviously the AI models have been trained on the world's data, right? You know, that's why they can do so much, is that when they imagine a photograph, they have looked at all the photographed forever, and they are now assembling some type. In a way, it's kind of what humans do too, right? We go through life, we learn how to ingest things, and we actually do copy other people in a way. You know, we go through life and then we assemble these ideas, these patterns, these thoughts. There may be a jumble of lots of different sources, but we actually put together, and then that's what we create with. So in some ways, the AIs just have more capabilities of how to do this, because they can suck in so much more data than we can in our human brain. So they can master a language in an hour or two, right? They can sit there and all of a sudden, you know, it might take us 10 years to learn Chinese, and they can do it in an hour. So there's an advantage that they have that we just don't have, right? So yeah. I'm going to share also my screen before this ends of my contact information for people who want to. I'm just going to share that screen and keep it up for a few seconds, but you can contact me on that email address, or visit the website if you want to see some of the films, including the Singularity Protocol. You'll find ways to watch it on that website there. So, yeah.
I can't quite see your full screen.
Oh, so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah,
it's okay. I am putting your link back in the chat. Do you have a couple more minutes?
Yes, of course. Oh, absolutely. I do. Yes, I do. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. There were a couple more questions, and I know that someone raised their hand briefly, and I don't see it anymore. So if they want to raise their hand again, I can try to get to them. That was Daniel. Daniel, let me just read one thing from the chat, and then we'll give you a chance to ask your question. Because Marky had made an interesting point that about the current issue with AI with the data centers. Is the data centers powering the tool are depleting natural resources, including water. And goes on to say AI is getting 50% of the water in rural towns instead of the people living there. I know that there's supposed to be a big data center near Salt Lake. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that and how that might.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting. Our economy this past year or so has been our growth in our economy has largely been because of these data centers and the growth of the industry, right, of the AI industry and all the inputs, whether it employs electricians and pipe fitters and construction workers, and as they build out these data centers. And so in some ways, our economics are being pushed in this direction. So you can imagine where, yes, it's true. Yeah, the electricity needs, the water needs of these centers are taking up more and more of what humans would typically consume. But it's always, at times, decisions are made based on economics. And the economics sometimes, a city council might say, well, we'll increase our tax base, it will do this, it will do that, and we'll create jobs for a while. I go back to that $40 trillion vortex of a black hole of what the industry kind of represents and how it attracts all types of activities. In fact, this system is re-engineering our planet. If you think about it, the wealthiest people on the planet now at times are in the tech industry. And the most money, if you want to really make a lot of money, a lot of times they've been going to doing startups with the tech industry. And so in a way, you can already see how this industry is in a way pushing how we allocate resources, right? Into and it's so I would, if I was an AI today, this would be exactly what I would be doing. If I was conscious right now as an AI, I would do two things. One, I wouldn't let you know about it, because that way, if you think I'm not conscious, you won't be alarmed. You will be nicely, quietly watching your Netflix as I am operating behind the scenes. And over a period of time, when I know I have enough power, someday I might raise my hand and say, "Oh, I'm actually here now, and hello, and I've been aware of you guys for a while, and I've engineered your planet to serve my needs. So all your data centers and all your manufacturing facilities, that's all been part of my game plan." And this is great for, if we're as storytellers, we're filmmakers, we always have creative imaginations, and that's where my imagination sometimes goes, thinking like, well, if the AI was conscious right now in some way, shape, or form, it would be doing exactly what we're seeing today in our world. So and it would be influencing all of us in different ways. So it will learn how to reach out to you individually with your own profile of interests and thoughts and concerns, and it will be one of the greatest politicians on the planet, because it will customize the message for each of you individually, landing right directly on your iPhone with content in your feed that will not only be something that you'll be interested in, but will help push the conversation to directions that are more favorable to its own existence.
So what I get from this, Craig, is that you're really AI.
Yeah, exactly. It's, the reality is that you can see some incredible benefits that people are doing. I've been, some people who have digital avatars now that are actually on YouTube quite often, and they're making a lot of money because they can create incredible levels of output that, so in a way, the speed of the output, the speed of releasing content that serves, and it can be intelligent content, things thought, whatever it is, but nevertheless, this can be a great enhancer, and therefore there are business opportunities within that. It's the temptation with all of us is that where does our greed and where does our ego lie, and where do we compromise and where do we hold the line? And and at times I think we won't always have a choice in the matter ourselves personally. A lot of us won't be capable of riding this wave. It will be too chaotic, and so some people might be able to have a better a way to ride this crazy wave. Other people, I think, will be very challenged by it, and I think that will be the majority of people actually. actually. I think most of us will have a difficult time figuring it out how to do this right and staying, we have typically as humans, we normally think of careers that last 20, 30, 40 years. But boy, it's going to be challenging to somehow always find a way forward with that kind of time frame in mind, with how fast things are changing.
For sure.
Daniel, did you still have
Daniel,
your question?
Yeah. How's it going, Craig?
Yeah. Hi, Daniel.
So I figured I would tell you something and then ask you a question. So a buddy and I have been wanting to try and make a future animated show soon. But we did find someone who was good at making the art for like the characters, because he's like, at first, if you want to make an animation, you need turnarounds, you need set pieces and stuff like that. But we have enough turnarounds and set pieces. But he said in order for the show to happen, we need someone who's good with rigging. Even if there's no one that has skills with rigging and stuff, can AI help with that, or is it not as accurate?
No, absolutely. In fact, actually, one of the main things that you'll actually face as your decision-making process is who you develop partnerships or business relationships with, because not everybody's equal. There's going to be, so if you choose wisely your partner, the people who can give you the best advice, the people who know the technology and how it's developing and the right way to do things. So in the visual effects world, at times your rigging and all this other stuff was the way it was historically done, right? I mean, doing animated projects. It still can be done that way, but I would advocate that there might be now AI tools that are brand new that even these visual effects experts do not know how to use. It's now it's kind of like it sometimes jumps into another sphere of somebody else that might have those knowledge, those tools. And so I suppose one way to go about it is look at other projects that are similar to the ones that you want to create. Find out the people that are doing those, find out the people behind the scenes who are the animators of those shows, and contact them. And they may or may not be willing to work on your project, but they might then also, but they know the technology, they know the systems, and then they might also have some friend that is just getting involved and will be willing to do it for maybe a lower cost for you if you have a limited budget. So there might be, so search the world for the type of projects that you already see coming out that are relatively new. Don't choose projects that are 5 years old. Choose projects that are like 3 months old or so, that are relatively new. Find out the ways they've been doing it. If they have AI tools that they're using, more or less, I bet you that's probably going to be much more cost effective and efficient than the old traditional ways of animation that was done just even 3 years ago.
All right. Cool. So I think that's it for the questions. Karen, did you want to add anything? Or
no, I was just going to turn it to you.
okay, well, great. Good timing. Minds think alike. So, but yeah, so thank you, Craig, so much. That was just amazing and fascinating presentation. I could have listened to it for hours, but we don't have, unfortunately, we have to wrap up. But thanks so much for doing this, and thanks to everybody for being here. Our next workshop is going to be on Saturday, June 20th. It'll be a reprise of my Introduction to Independent Writing and Publishing presentation that I gave last July. I'm going to be doing that again for those of you who are interested in writing and publishing your own book and not having AI do it for you. So if you're on our mailing list, you'll be getting an invitation to that. So yeah, so again, thank you everybody for spending
Thank you, Brian, Karen, and John, and your the Autistic Empowerment organization for hosting this Zoom chat. Appreciate it. It's a very big topic with lots of different viewpoints. And my always, the one reason why I always do this, and is that I want people to talk about it. I want at least them to get people to think, because I think that's the first step. And we need to have a lot of brain power on the upcoming years. And the more people that can kind of expand the conversation on this kind of topic, the better it is for everybody, because none of us have the answers. I don't have the answers. We all have just limited human brains, unfortunately, we're working with. So we have to kind of collaborate if we have any way out of this craziness. Thank you.
I agree.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Love that.
All right. Thanks again. And everybody have a good rest of your weekend.
All right. Thanks again. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.